Okay, we're going to start section 6.1, and the first thing you need to do is from your journal, you're going to rip out pages 170 and 171. Then you're going to take your interactive notebook and you're going to glue in there. On one page, I want you to have the core concepts of the zero exponent and the negative exponent. On the next page, you're going to have product of powers property, quotient of powers property, and power of power property. And then on this page, we're going to do power of a product property and power of a quotient property. So pause the video now, rewind it to make sure you get all of that glued into your interactive notebook. So the first property with exponents is pretty easy, but you just have to memorize it. It's a zero exponent concept. It means that for any non-zero number a, any number, even for variables, any number, anything to the power of 0 is always going to equal 1. A cannot be 0. So for example, 3 to the power of 0 is equal to 1. X to the power of 0 is equal to 1. Y to the power of 0 is equal to 1. So it's one of those rules that you need to memorize. Pretty easy. Okay, second one, negative exponents. This one gets a little bit more complicated. Anytime you see a negative exponent, so 4 to the negative 2, it means that you need to put the reciprocal of 4, which is 1 over 4. It doesn't mean that 4 is negative. That's the biggest mistake that I see kids make. It means that you write it as the reciprocal of a to the n. So let me give you an example. This is Mumbling Progress 3. 3 to the negative 3. Okay, there's a negative exponent. It says to evaluate it. So since it's a negative exponent, you're going to write this in its reciprocal form. That negative exponent goes away. And now you have to evaluate it. 1 over 3 to the third power is 1 over 27. So we're going to do Mumbling Progress 4 now, and in class I'll talk about a little story that's going to help you remember about exponents. But we look right here. Oh look, I have something to the power of 0. That means that 5 to the power of 0 is really 1. Now I don't want you to get confused with this negative here, because there's no parentheses around here. That means that 0 exponent is only looking at the 5. So this means that this is negative 1 on top. Now let's look at the bottom. 2 to the negative 2. Oh, there's a negative exponent here. That means that it's going to be the reciprocal of 1/2. That means we're going to move this 2 to the negative 2 up to the numerator. So now it's going to be 1 times 2 to the positive 2, since I already moved it. And negative 1 times 2 is going to equal negative 4. Okay, now we're going to do Mumbling Progress 4. I realized that Mumbling Progress 2 and 3, I wrote the wrong numbers last time. So here we go. Look, negative exponents. The negative exponents means to make it the reciprocal, which means from the numerator we're going to put it in the denominator. So that means 3 squared is going to go in the denominator. Take a look at this one, x to the negative 5. Again, a negative exponent. That's going to go in the denominator. Now, look here at the bottom. Y to the 0, that's a 0 power. So anything to the 0 power is just positive 1. So let's just simplify this. And if you notice I made a mistake here, it should be x to the positive 5. There's nothing upstairs, which means it's just going to be left as a 1 in the numerator. So now we're going to simplify the bottom. 3 squared is 9, 9x to the 5th. And that's your answer. So we're going to move on to a product of powers property. So this says that if the bases are the same, so the base here is 4 and 4, then all you have to do is add the exponents. So the base is 4 to the 6th, 4 to the 3rd, you add them up, equals 4 to the 9th. So algebraically, the same thing with variables. A to the m times a to the nth, you have to make sure that you add them, and it's going to look like that. That gets tricky sometimes. So let's do Mumbling Progress 5. 10 to the 4th times 10 to the negative 6. We're just going to add those two, and the answer is going to be 10 to the negative 2. However, we don't want to write it as negative exponent, so you're going to want to remember the negative exponent means to write the reciprocal, so that's the same as 1 over 10 squared, which is the same as 1 over 100. Okay, modeling progress 6. You're going to add this one together. X to the 9th times x to the negative 9th. 9 plus negative 9 is 0. And if you recall from the previous lesson, that anything to the 0 power is 1. Now moving on to quotient and dividing power properties. So when you multiply them, you add them like we did above. For this one, we're going to subtract them, as long as they're the same base. So 4 to the 6th divided by 4 to the 3rd is really 6 minus 3 for the exponents. That means 4 to the 3rd. Algebraically, same thing, you're going to subtract the exponents. So here, this is a tricky one. Remember, there's no parentheses or glasses, as I'll explain in class. So that means the 8 is only looking at the 5. I'm going to rewrite this so it looks a little bit easier for you. So it's really negative 1 times 5 to the 8th over negative 1 times 5 to the 4th. That might be easier to see. So we're going to subtract that. It's going to be 5 to the 4th. Negative 1 divided by negative 1 makes positive 1, so I don't need that. It's not going to be in the denominator because positive exponents be up in the numerator. And you have to multiply that out, which comes out to be 625. Make sure to use your calculator. Okay, lastly, let's do power of a power property. So now we have parentheses. So it's 4 to the 6th to the 3rd power. When you see a power to a power, you're going to multiply it. So 4 to the 6th, that whole quantity to the 3rd power is really 4 to the 18th. So same thing algebraically. A to the nth power is really a to the m times n. So let's do this one. So since it's a power to the power, you're going to multiply these two powers. So that means it's going to be 6 squared, and 6 squared is 36, because negative 2 times negative 1 is positive 2. And modeling progress 10, w to the 12th to the 5th, you're going to multiply these two. It's just going to be w to the 60th. So the power of a product property means that if you have an exponent that's on the outside of parentheses, that you have to give the exponent, the power, to each of the factors inside the parentheses. So this is the same thing as 10 to the negative 3 times y to the negative 3. So simplifying that, 10 to the negative 3, remember it's the reciprocal, is 1 over 10 cubed times y to the negative 3 is 1 over y cubed. Simplify that, becomes 1 over 1,000 y cubed. So the last property is the power of a quotient property. So when you have a division property like this, and the parentheses around the entire fraction, and there's an exponent to it, you have to find the power of the numerator and the power of the denominator. So you split them, and then you solve it. So 3 halves to the power of 5 is the same as 3 to the power of 5 divided by 2 to the power of 5, and then you solve it. So let's do modeling progress 12. So I'm going to give the negative up here to the 4, so this is going to be negative 4 parentheses to the 5th power divided by n to the 5th power. And negative 4 times negative 4 times negative 4 times negative 4 times negative 4 comes out to be negative 1024 over n to the 5th. Okay, modeling progress 13. 1 over 2k squared. Again, I'm going to split it. This is going to be 1 to the 5th over, now I'm going to even split this using the property above. It's going to be 2 to the 5th times k squared to the 5th. Remember, the 5th goes to each of the factors in the denominator. So 1 to the 5th is easy. That's 1. 2 to the 5th is 2 times 2 times 2, 5 times, which comes out to be 32. And remember the other property, k to the 2nd to the 5th power, you multiply these two, which comes out to be k to the 10th. Monitoring progress 14. Oh, look, there's a negative exponent to the entire thing. That means this entire term has to be, you need the reciprocal of it, which means you're going to flip the entire thing. That's the same thing as 7 over 6c to the 2nd power. So it's going to flip it. Now let's give the power to each of the numerators and denominator. So 7 squared over 6 squared c squared. Remember, each one. 7 squared is going to be 49. 6 squared is 36. C squared. So all of these rules is just practice. You'll have a lot of IXL practice to get used to it.